One book, one extraordinary life. 48 chapters of saints, science, and the search for God.
I'm Kai,
And I'm Maya.
and this is our take on Autobiography of a Yogi, chapter by chapter.
A young boy in India wakes up one night with a vision so strange, so luminous, that it changes the entire direction of his life. He sees yogis meditating in snow-covered mountains, and then a light appears, speaking to him in silence. That boy is Paramhansa Yogananda, and his birth name was Mukunda.
And this is where it all begins. Chapter 1, My Parents and Early Life. When I first read this chapter, I expected it to jump right into the mystical stuff, But Yogananda does something really smart. He starts with the family. He starts with the soil this extraordinary life grew out of. And I think that's deliberate, because without understanding the parents, you can't understand the son.
Right, and what soil it is. Because here's the thing, Mukunda didn't just appear out of nowhere. He was born in 1893 in Gorakhpur, in the United Provinces of northeastern India, fourth of 8 children, 4 boys and 4 girls, a big Bengali household. And he opens the chapter by saying something incredible. He says his earliest memories cover the anachronistic features of a previous incarnation. Clear recollections came to him of a distant life as a yogi amidst the Himalayan snows.
That detail is easy to skip past, but it's huge. From the very first paragraph, Yogananda is telling us this soul didn't start here. These glimpses of the past, by some dimensionless link, also afforded him a glimpse of the future. So even as an infant, there's something ancient operating in him. But then he pulls you right back to earth with these wonderfully human details about being a baby. He says he was resentfully conscious of not being able to walk or express himself freely. Prayerful surges arose within him as he realized his bodily impotence.
A baby angry about being a baby. That's such a Yogananda detail. He doesn't let you stay in the mystical too long. He always brings it back to the very human, the very ordinary. And that's what makes this book work.
So tell me about the father, Bhagavati Charan Ghosh, because he's a fascinating figure. He's a railroad executive. His position was similar to that of a vice president at the Bengal Nagpur Railway. The family has real means and real status. But the way Yogananda describes him, kind, grave, at times stern, loving him dearly, the children yet observed a certain reverential distance. An outstanding mathematician and logician, guided principally by his intellect.
And yet the man lived almost like an ascetic. He clung to one old pair of shoes until they were useless. His sons bought automobiles when those came into popular use, and Bhagavati was still content with the trolley car for his daily ride to the office. He never visited the theater. He sought his recreation in reading the Bhagavad Gita and in spiritual practices. The accumulation of money for the sake of power was completely alien to his nature.
And then there's the bonuses story, which really brings it home. After his father retired, an English accountant came to examine the books of the Bengal Nagpur Railway, and the investigator discovered something that amazed everyone. Bhagavati had never applied for overdue bonuses. The accountant told the company, he did the work of 3 men. He has $125,000 owing to him as back compensation. That's about $41,250. And he thought so little about the check that he overlooked any mention to the family. It was only discovered later when his youngest son Bishnu noticed the deposit.
And when Bishnu asked him about it, his father just said, "Why be elated by material profit? The one who pursues a goal of even-mindedness is neither jubilant with gain nor depressed by loss. He knows that man arrives penniless in this world and departs without a single rupee."
He wasn't philosophizing. He was just describing how he actually lived. That's the thing that gets me about this family. The principles aren't abstract theories. They're embodied in the daily choices.
And then there's the mother. She's the other half of the equation entirely. Yogananda simply calls her mother throughout the book and describes her as a queen of hearts. Where the father guided the family through intellect and discipline, she taught us only through love. And I think this is important, After her death, father displayed more of his inner tenderness. Yogananda noticed that his gaze often metamorphosed into his mother's, like the father was carrying her forward in himself.
There's a story early on that shows their dynamic perfectly. Yogananda writes that mother held an open hand toward the needy. Father was also kindly disposed, but his respect for law and order extended to the budget. One fortnight, the mother spent more than the father's monthly income feeding the poor, and when the father asked her, gently, to keep her charities within a reasonable limit,
Even that gentle rebuke was too much for her. She ordered a hackney carriage, not hinting to the children at any disagreement, and announced she was going to her mother's home. "Goodbye, I'm going away to my mother's home." Ancient ultimatum, Yogananda writes, and the household broke into astounded lamentations. But then their maternal uncle arrived opportunely, whispered some sage counsel to the father, garnered no doubt from the ages. After a few conciliatory remarks, mother happily dismissed the cap. And Yogananda says that was the only trouble he ever noticed between his parents. But the exchange that goes even deeper is the 10 rupee story. The mother wanted to give 10 rupees to a hapless woman who'd just arrived at the house. Mother's smile had its own persuasion. The father said, "Why 10 rupees? One is enough." And he told a whole story to justify it. How when his parents died, he'd had his first taste of poverty, walking miles to school with only a small banana for breakfast. Later, at university, he applied to a wealthy judge for aid of 1 rupee per month, and the judge declined, remarking that even a rupee is important.
And then the mother turned it right back on him with this perfect logic. How bitterly you recall the denial of that rupee. Do you want this woman also to remember painfully your refusal of 10 rupees, which she needs urgently?
And the father said, "You win." With the immemorial gesture of vanquished husbands, he opened his wallet. "Here is a 10 rupee note. Give it to her with my goodwill."
I mean, that's such a beautifully human exchange, but it tells you everything about how this household works. Discipline and love, intellect and heart, and together they create something whole. These are the 2 streams Mukunda inherits from them.
And both of those streams trace back to the same spiritual source, because early in their married life, both parents became disciples of a great master named Lahiri Mahasaya of Benares, and the mother made a remarkable admission to Mukunda's eldest sister Roma. She said that she and the father lived together as man and wife only once a year for the purpose of having children. This contact strengthened the father's naturally ascetical temperament.
The story of how the father came to Lahiri is where the chapter takes its first turn into the extraordinary. A railway employee named Abhinash Babu worked under the father in the Gorakhpur office. Abhinash was deeply devoted to his guru, Lahiri Mahasaya, and would tell young Mukunda engrossing tales of Indian saints. Eventually, Abhinash asked the father for a week's leave to visit his guru in Benares.
And the father refused. "Are you going to become a religious fanatic? Concentrate on your office work if you want to forge ahead."
Poor Abhinash. Sadly walking home along a woodland path that day, he met the father in a palanquin. The father dismissed his servants and conveyance, fell into step beside Abhinash, and started pointing out the advantages of striving for worldly success. And Abhinash heard him listlessly, his heart repeating one thing, "Lahiri Mahasaya, I cannot live without seeing you."
And then their path took them to the edge of a tranquil field, where the rays of the late afternoon sun were still crowning the tall ripple of the wild grass. They paused in admiration, and there in the field, only a few yards from them, the form of Lahiri Mahasaya suddenly appeared.
And he looked at Bhagavati and said, "Bhagavati, you are too hard on your employee." His voice was resonant in their astounded ears, and then he vanished as mysteriously as he had come.
And the father is completely transformed. He tells Abhinash on the spot, "Not only do I give you leave, but I give myself leave to start for Benares tomorrow. I must know this great Lahiri Mahasaya, who is able to materialize himself at will in order to intercede for you. I will take my wife and ask this master to initiate us in his spiritual path."
And when they arrive in Benares and enter Lahiri's secluded home, the guru repeats the exact same words. "Bhagavati, you are too hard on your employee." The same words he used 2 days before in the Gorakhpur field, confirming it was real. And then Lahiri initiates both parents into Kriya Yoga.
So when Mukunda is born, he's born into a household where spiritual practice is alive every day. The family altar holds a photograph of Lahiri Mahasaya that traveled with them to the various cities where the father was transferred, and that photograph has its own extraordinary story.
Lahiri had an aversion to being photographed. A group picture was once taken of him with disciples, and the plate showed every disciple clearly but revealed nothing more than a blank space where the master should have been. The phenomenon was widely discussed.
And then an expert photographer named Gangadhar Babu boasted that the fugitive figure would not escape him. He set everything up, 12 plates, and on each one the imprint of the wooden bench and screen was clear, but the master's form was missing again.
With tears and shattered pride, Gangadhar sought out his guru, and Lahiri said something really direct. "I am spirit. Can your camera reflect the omnipresent invisible?" But then he said, "Come then tomorrow morning. I will pose for you." And the next morning, the sacred figure, not cloaked with mysterious imperceptibility, was sharp on the plate. The master never posed for another picture.
And young Mukunda meditated before this photograph regularly. He describes seeing the photographic image emerge from its small frame and, taking a living form, sit before him. When he attempted to touch the feet of his luminous body, it would change and again become the picture. As childhood slipped into boyhood, Lahiri Mahasaya transformed in his mind from a little image cribbed in a frame to a living, enlightening presence.
And then comes the cholera. Mukunda is about 8. He's at the family estate in Ichapur, Bengal, and he gets Asiatic cholera. His life was despaired of. The doctors could do nothing. And his mother sits by his bed and frantically motions him to look at Lahiri Mahasaya's picture on the wall above his head.
Bow to him mentally. She knew he was too feeble even to lift his hands in salutation. If you really show your devotion and inwardly kneel before him, your life will be spared.
And he gazed at the photograph and saw there a blinding light, enveloping his body and the entire room. His nausea and uncontrollable symptoms disappeared. He was well. At once he felt strong enough to bend over and touch Mother's feet, and she pressed her head repeatedly against the little picture. O omnipresent Master, I thank thee that thy light hath healed my son.
Shortly after that healing comes the vision that I think defines his entire childhood. He's sitting on his bed one morning and falls into a deep reverie. This probing thought comes powerfully into his mind. What is behind the darkness of closed eyes?
And an immense flash of light manifests to his inward gaze. Divine shapes of saints sitting in meditation posture in mountain caves, formed like miniature cinema pictures on a large screen of radiance within his forehead. And he speaks aloud, "Who are you?" And the celestial response comes, "We are the Himalayan yogis."
His heart is thrilled. He cries out, "I long to go to the Himalayas and become like you." The vision vanishes, but the silvery beams expand in ever-widening circles to infinity. And then, what is this wondrous glow? And a voice like murmuring clouds, "I am Ishwara, I am light."
And Mukunda responds, "I want to be one with thee." At 8 years old, that's the direction set forever. And out of the slow dwindling of this divine ecstasy, he salvaged a permanent legacy of inspiration to seek God. He is eternal, ever-new joy. This memory persisted long after the day of rapture.
And then there are these other moments showing the extraordinary power developing in him. The story with his sister Uma under the neem tree. She's helping him study his Bengali primer. Uma complains about a boil on her leg, and Mukunda fetches some ointment, but smears it not on her boil, on his own healthy forearm.
Uma asks, "Why do you use medicine on a healthy arm?" And he says, "Well, sis, I feel I am going to have a boil tomorrow. I am testing your ointment on the spot where the boil will appear." She calls him a little liar. He tells her not to call him a liar until she sees what happens in the morning. And then, with an adamant resolution in his voice, "By the power of will in me, I say that tomorrow I shall have a fairly large boil in this exact place on my arm, and your boil shall swell to twice its present size."
Morning found him with a stalwart boil on the indicated spot. Uma's boil had doubled. With a shriek, she rushed to their mother. "Mukunda has become a necromancer." And the mother gravely instructed him never to use the power of words for doing harm. She didn't deny the power existed. She confirmed it completely. But she taught him the first law. Power without compassion will only create suffering.
And then there's the kite story, which is it's pure delight. The family has moved to Lahore. Mukunda has set up a small, informal shrine on the balcony with a picture of the Divine Mother in the form of Kali. An unequivocal conviction came over him that fulfillment would crown any of his prayers uttered in that sacred spot. He's standing there with Uma one day, watching 2 kites flying over the roofs across a very narrow lane.
Uma pushes him playfully. "Why are you so quiet?" And he says, "I am just thinking how wonderful it is that Divine Mother gives me whatever I ask." And Uma laughs derisively. "I suppose she would give you those 2 kites." And Mukunda just says, "Why not?" and begins silent prayers.
The players across the lane begin their match, strings coated with glue and ground glass. One string is cut. The kite floats in Mukunda's direction. It goes stationary for a moment through sudden abatement of breeze, and the string entangles firmly with a cactus plant on top of the opposite house. A perfect loop is formed for his seizure. He hands the first kite to Uma.
But Uma isn't convinced. She says, "It was just an extraordinary accident and not an answer to your prayer. If the other kite comes to you, then I shall believe.
but her dark eyes conveyed more amazement than her words.
And Mukunda continues his prayers with crescendo intensity. A forcible tug by the other player results in the abrupt loss of his kite. It heads toward Mukunda, dancing in the wind. The cactus plant, his helpful assistant, again secures the string in the necessary loop. He presents his second trophy to Uma.
Indeed, Divine Mother listens to you. This is all too uncanny for me, and she bolts away like a frightened fawn. 'Cause she runs from the balcony, not frightened of her brother, frightened of the reality breaking through. Kites don't come to you because you pray, except they did. So by the end of chapter 1, the stage is completely set. This is a child who remembers past lives, who has power over matter and will, whose parents are both initiated yogis, who has been healed by light from a guru's photograph, and none of this is treated as impossible in his household. It's just what happens. It's the world as he knows it.
And now his path is about to begin in earnest, because next time something happens that shatters Mukunda's world completely. His mother dies, and a mysterious message from beyond death changes everything.
And I'll just say, if this first chapter moved you at all, chapter 2 hits differently. It's one of the most emotionally raw and beautiful things you'll ever read. We'll see you there.